Her hands trembled as she held the note under the dim light of the hotel hallway. The words were short, almost careless, but they shattered everything she thought she knew about that night. Across the room, a man she barely knew, yet could not stop thinking about, stood frozen, as if fate had orchestrated the entire evening to collide at this very moment. This isn't just another love story. This is the tale of a woman who thought she was in control of her choices, only to discover that life, and love, had other plans. A single night. 2 strangers. And 2 surprises that would alter the course of both their lives forever. Betrayal. Longing. An impossible choice. And the kind of love that arrives uninvited, shaking the ground beneath your feet. But the question remains, would she embrace it, or run from it? Her name was Lyra Esten. A schoolteacher by day, a quiet dreamer by night. Lyra was the kind of woman people often overlooked, polite, reliable, the friend who always listened but rarely revealed her own heart. What no one knew was that beneath her calm exterior, she carried the weight of a heartbreak that never fully healed. And then there was Lucien Thorne. An ambitious lawyer, brilliant and relentless in the courtroom, but scarred by the cost of his success. He had traded warmth for victory, charm for control. People respected him, envied him even, but when the workday ended, his penthouse was silent. He had everything, and nothing at all. Their worlds should never have touched. But fate has a way of pushing strangers together in the most unexpected of ways. It began with a wedding invitation. Lyra, reluctantly attending her cousin's lavish reception, sat tucked away in the corner, watching couples sway to the music. Lucien, dragged there by a business associate, stood at the bar, sipping whiskey, uninterested in small talk. One glance. A chance brush of shoulders. A polite exchange of words that carried an undercurrent neither of them could explain. And when the night deepened, when the music grew softer and the crowd thinner, Lyra and Lucien found themselves on the balcony, 2 strangers sharing a silence that spoke louder than words. But what neither of them knew then was that by dawn, their lives would change. That single night would leave behind 2 surprises, one written in truth, the other in the heart. The night pressed on, and what began as a simple exchange of words slowly unfolded into something neither of them expected. On that balcony, with the hum of music behind them and the city lights glowing in the distance, Lyra and Lucien lingered longer than they should have. Lyra found herself studying the man beside her. His presence was commanding, but not in the way of arrogance. It was the kind of quiet authority that drew you in without effort. His sharp suit and deliberate movements spoke of discipline, yet his eyes carried something softer, a hint of weariness, like he'd been carrying too much for too long. Lucien, on the other hand, was unprepared for her. Lyra's simplicity unsettled him. She wasn't trying to impress. She wasn't calculating her words, the way so many in his world did. She just was. Honest, grounded, unadorned, and yet, when she smiled, it was as though the night paused to listen. A conversation began. Hesitant at first, then flowing with surprising ease. They spoke of trivial things, how Lyra disliked crowded rooms, how Lucien preferred the silence of late nights. But beneath the surface, every word carried a current. It wasn't what they said, it was how they listened to one another. Hours slipped by. And with them, something dangerous began to stir. When Lyra laughed at one of his rare attempts at humor, Lucien felt something foreign, a spark he had long convinced himself no longer existed. When he asked about her dreams, she admitted quietly, "I've always wanted to travel, to see the places I've only read about." Lucien studied her, torn between envy and admiration. He had traveled the world, yes, but not with wonder. Not with joy. Always with purpose. Always with an agenda. And for Lyra, Lucien was a puzzle. Who was this man who spoke so little about himself, yet made her want to know more with every silence? But beneath their growing connection, there was tension. Lyra could sense it, the way his gaze would sometimes drift away, as if measuring the risks of revealing too much. Lucien knew it too, that he was letting down a wall he had spent years building. The night ended reluctantly. A polite goodbye, a lingering glance. But it didn't end there. The next morning, Lyra found her phone buzzing with a message. A number she didn't recognize, but the words were unmistakable. Last night was unexpected. I'd like to see you again. L. Her heart skipped. Lucien Thorne. Most people would have ignored it, or dismissed it as a passing moment from a stranger at a wedding. But Lyra couldn't. And neither could he. One message turned into two. 2 into 10. Days blurred into nights as they exchanged words, sometimes light-hearted, sometimes profound. In the privacy of text messages, they allowed themselves to speak more freely than they ever could face-to-face. Lucien confessed pieces of himself he rarely admitted to anyone, his loneliness, his fear of vulnerability, his regrets. Lyra, in turn, revealed her hesitations, her longing for something real, her fear of being hurt again. And yet, even through glowing screens and hurried exchanges, something undeniable grew. Still, shadows lingered. There were things Lucien didn't say. A truth he withheld. And Lyra sensed it. She couldn't name it, but she knew it was there. The spark had been lit. The question was, how long before it turned into a fire that neither of them could contain? The messages had become a rhythm. Morning greetings. Late-night confessions. Words typed across glowing screens that stitched together a fragile, unexpected bond. But reality has a way of intruding on even the sweetest illusions. One evening, Lyra received a message that was different. It wasn't playful. It wasn't light. Meet me. Tonight. No phones. No distractions. Her breath caught. She almost declined. Something about the abruptness unsettled her. But curiosity, and perhaps something more dangerous, drove her forward. The location, an unassuming cafe, nearly empty at such a late hour. The kind of place where conversations could vanish into the hum of an old refrigerator and the clink of coffee cups. When Lyra walked in, she found Lucien waiting. But he wasn't the man she remembered from the balcony. This Lucien was sharper. His presence heavier. There was no champagne glass in his hand, no city skyline to soften his edges. Lyra, he said simply, standing as she approached. She sat across from him, her heart racing. Something in his eyes told her this wasn't just another casual meeting. I need to tell you something, Lucien began. His voice was low, controlled, almost rehearsed. Lyra leaned in, bracing herself. You don't know who I am. Not really. And if you choose to walk away after this, I won't stop you. The silence between them thickened. She searched his face, waiting. Lucien exhaled, as though he had been holding his breath for years. My name isn't just Lucien Thorne. I'm not just a businessman. I'm part of a family. A family most people avoid. The kind of family that lives in shadows, that makes enemies rather than friends. Lyra blinked, not quite processing. What do you mean? He hesitated, then said the words that shifted everything. My family runs one of the most feared syndicates in Europe. Lyra's blood ran cold. She had heard whispers of men like him. Men whose wealth wasn't simply inherited but enforced. Men who commanded loyalty not through kindness, but through fear. For a moment, her instinct screamed at her to stand up, to walk away, to never answer another message again. But she didn't. Because even as the confession settled like a weight between them, Lucien's eyes betrayed something else. A plea. a quiet desperation that contradicted everything his words claimed. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because," Lucien said softly, "you deserve the truth. And because I don't want to lie to you." "Not you." The air crackled with tension. Lyra's thoughts spun in a storm of fear, disbelief, and something else she couldn't explain, the echo of the man she had come to know, the one who listened to her dreams at midnight, the one who laughed quietly at her stories. She wanted to believe that man was real. But now, she faced a question she couldn't avoid. Was she falling for Lucien born the man, or Lucien born the monster? And Lucien, as he watched her wrestle with the truth, silently feared the answer. Lyra should have left that night. Logic told her so. Every part of her sensible, careful nature screamed for her to walk out of the cafe and never look back. But logic had little power over the heart, and less still against the fire in Lucien's eyes. For days after the revelation, she wrestled with herself. His words replayed endlessly in her mind. "My family runs one of the most feared syndicates in Europe." Those words should have destroyed any feeling she had. Yet strangely, they only deepened her intrigue. Because beneath the danger, beneath the shadows that cloaked him, she had glimpsed vulnerability. A man who, for once, seemed stripped of pretense. And so, she texted him. At first, it was short, cautious. "Are you safe?" she asked one night. He replied almost instantly. "Not always. But I feel safer when I hear from you." Her heart stuttered. Against her better judgment, the conversations resumed. But things were different now. She noticed the silences between his words. The subtle changes in tone. The edge that sometimes crept in when he was distracted. And once, in the middle of their exchange, his replies stopped abruptly for hours, only to return at dawn, one single message flashing on her screen. "I didn't mean for you to wait. I was occupied. But you stayed. That means more than you know." Occupied. The word lingered ominously in her mind. What did occupied mean in Lucien's world? Still, her curiosity refused to die. One evening, he invited her again, this time not to a cafe, but to his home. It wasn't just a home. It was a fortress. Iron gates loomed tall, guarded by men in suits whose silence was sharper than any blade. The mansion beyond looked carved from stone itself, vast and intimidating, yet somehow lonely. As Lyra stepped inside, her breath caught. Everything screamed wealth: marble floors, crystal chandeliers, walls lined with portraits of stern-faced men who surely bore Lucien's bloodline. Yet despite the grandeur, the house felt cold. Empty. Until she saw him. Lucien descended the grand staircase with the quiet confidence of someone used to command. He was dressed simply, no suit, no tie, just dark clothes that softened his imposing frame. But his eyes, those stormy gray eyes, lit up when they found her. "You came," he murmured, as though he hadn't expected her to. Lyra swallowed hard, nerves thrumming through her. "I don't know why I did." He smiled faintly. "Neither do I. But I'm glad you're here." They spent the evening walking through the echoing halls, talking in hushed tones as though the house itself were listening. He showed her his library, his study, even the balcony overlooking the city, the very place where he confessed he often stood alone, wondering if the empire he carried was worth the weight it placed on his soul. There were moments when the silence between them grew thick with unspoken desire. His hand brushed hers once, lingering longer than necessary. She felt the pull, dangerous, magnetic, undeniable. But there was something else too. Every time their eyes locked, she saw it: fear. Not fear of her, but fear for her. When the night grew late, he stopped her before she left. "You shouldn't come back here," he said quietly. "Every time you step into this world, the risk doubles. If anyone discovers what you mean to me, his jaw tightened. They won't stop at me. They'll come for you. Lyra's chest tightened. She should have promised to leave. To never see him again. To protect herself. But instead, she whispered, "Then let them try." The words startled even her. Lucien's gaze darkened, something between warning and admiration flickering across his face. Slowly, he leaned closer, his breath brushing against her ear as he murmured, "You have no idea what you've just said, Lyra." Her pulse thundered. Her knees nearly gave out. And though no kiss was shared that night, the tension between them burned hotter than fire. When she finally left his mansion, the air outside felt sharper, colder, almost hostile, as if the world itself sensed she had crossed a line she could never uncross. And for the first time, she realized this was no longer just curiosity. No longer innocent. She was entangled. The days that followed were both intoxicating and unbearable. Lyra and Lucien had fallen into a rhythm, stolen moments in darkened rooms, hushed phone calls in the middle of the night, touches that lingered too long to be innocent. Each encounter deepened what neither dared to name aloud. But love born in shadows cannot remain hidden forever. It began subtly. Lyra noticed men she didn't recognize near her apartment, strangers who lingered a little too long at the corner, cars parked with engines idling, silhouettes in her peripheral vision. At first, she told herself it was paranoia. But paranoia turned real one night when she returned home to find her door slightly ajar. Her breath caught. She froze in the hallway, heart hammering. The door had been locked. She knew it had. Slowly, she pushed it open. Inside, nothing was taken. No drawers rifled, no money missing. But on her kitchen counter, a single item lay neatly placed, her phone charger, cut in half. The message was clear. She called Lucien immediately. He arrived within minutes, fury radiating off him like heat. His men searched the apartment, but whoever had been there was long gone. Lucien turned to her, his hands trembling as he gripped her shoulders. "They know about you." "Who?" Lyra whispered. "My enemies," he growled. "The ones who destroy everything I've built. They've found my weakness." His voice broke with rare emotion. "You." Lyra's fear spiked, but deeper still was guilt. She had stepped into his world willingly. Now the danger was no longer abstract, it was real, pressing against her door. For days, Lucien doubled security, assigning guards to shadow her every step. But protection felt more like imprisonment. Everywhere she went, eyes followed. Every sound made her flinch. The invisible walls of Lucien's empire closed in around her, and she began to question if her heart could bear the weight. Then came the betrayal. One evening, Lucien returned home later than usual, his face hard, jaw set in fury. "What happened?" Lyra asked, dread curling in her stomach. "One of my own," he spat. "Someone I trusted, leaking information. They gave your name. Your address. To my rivals." The words shattered the fragile trust she held in his world. If his own circle could turn on him, what chance did she have to survive among them? Fear gnawed at her. She tried to speak reason into him, tried to beg him to let her go, to release her from the storms surrounding him. But Lucien's obsession only grew. "I can't lose you, Lyra," he told her one night, gripping her hand with desperation. "You don't understand, you're the only thing that makes any of this bearable." "But it's killing me," she whispered back, tears welling in her eyes. "Every moment I'm with you, I feel the danger pressing closer. I can't sleep. I can't breathe. I'm not built for this life, Lucien." His eyes burned with anguish, but before he could answer, the danger they feared finally struck. Lyra was walking home after work when a black van pulled up beside her. Two men stepped out, their faces masked. Before she could scream, they grabbed her, dragging her toward the open door. But fate had Lucien watching. His guards, ever present, intervened, gunfire cracking through the night. Neighbors screamed, windows shattered. Lyra dropped to the ground, trembling, as the men fled into the chaos. Lucien himself arrived seconds later, pulling her into his arms, shielding her with his body as though he could absorb every bullet meant for her. That night, as sirens wailed in the distance and his men secured the area, Lyra broke. She pushed him away, sobbing. "This is my life now? Running, hiding, almost dying in the street because of who you are." "Because of who we are," he corrected, his voice thick. "I won't let them touch you. I'll burn the city before I let them." But Lyra shook her head, her heart splintering under the weight of it all. "No, Lucien. I can't live like this. Loving you feels like drowning, and I'm already under." Her words were a knife to his chest. He tried to reach for her, but she stepped back, tears streaming, shaking her head. "I thought I could survive your world," she whispered. "But your world is killing mine." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the wreckage of all they had built. Lucien's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The man who ruled empires, who bent men to their knees with a glance, now stood powerless, undone by the only woman he had ever let into his heart. And for Lyra, the walk away was the hardest of her life. Every step tore at her soul, but she told herself it was the only way to live. The nights after Lyra walked away were long, sleepless, and hollow. She returned to her small apartment, the place that once felt like safety, now echoing with absence. Every corner reminded her of him, the warmth of his hand, the gravity in his gaze, the reckless way he loved her despite everything. But for the first time, silence was her companion. And silence hurt more than the chaos ever had. Lucien, meanwhile, became a storm. His empire noticed the shift. The once calm, calculated boss moved with raw fury. He hunted those who had betrayed him, dismantling rival networks with merciless precision. His enemies fell one by one, but none of it brought him peace. Because when he closed his eyes, he didn't see blood or victory. He saw Lyra, standing in the street with tears on her cheeks, whispering that loving him was drowning her. It broke him in ways bullets never could. Days stretched into weeks. Lyra threw herself into work, trying to anchor herself in a life before Lucien. But normalcy no longer fit. Every patient she tended, every routine moment, felt muted. Because once you've touched a fire that bright, ordinary light feels cold. And then, one night, everything changed. Lyra returned home late, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. She unlocked her door, stepped inside, and froze. A single white rose lay on her kitchen counter, delicate against the dull light. Her breath caught. He had been here. Her phone buzzed. One message. Just 3 words. "Come downstairs." L. Her heart thundered in her chest. Against every whisper of reason, she obeyed. Outside, parked under the flickering street lamp, was Lucien's black car. He stood waiting, not surrounded by guards, not armored by his empire. Just him. When she approached, she saw it instantly. Something in him had changed. The iron walls in his eyes were cracked, replaced by raw exhaustion and hope. "Why are you here?" Lyra asked softly, clutching her coat tighter. "Because I can't let it end like this," Lucien said, his voice low, almost breaking. "I've spent weeks destroying everything that threatened you. And I realized, none of it matters without you. The power, the empire, the fear. It's empty." Lyra's breath trembled. "Lucien." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. I walked away from meetings that would have secured me everything. I turned my back on allies who once called me untouchable. All for one thing, the chance to stand here and tell you that I choose you. No matter what it costs. Silence hung between them, heavy and trembling. Lyra's tears spilled before she could stop them. She wanted to run to him, to let him wrap her in the safety of his arms. But fear still clawed at her chest. "You think love is enough to erase what you are?" she whispered, voice breaking. "No," he admitted. "But love is enough to change who I will be." His words struck her like lightning. For the first time, Lucien wasn't promising power, wasn't vowing violence. He was offering surrender, the one thing she never thought he could give. The choice sat heavy in her hands. Stay, and risk losing everything she thought she knew about safety. Leave, and carry a lifetime of regret. Finally, with trembling steps, Lyra closed the distance between them. She pressed her hand to his chest, feeling the wild heartbeat beneath. "If I do this," she whispered, "you don't get to run back to the shadows every time it's easier. You don't get to love me halfway. It's everything, Lucien. Or nothing." His hand covered hers, strong and certain. "Then it's everything." And with those words, he kissed her, a kiss that wasn't born of desperation this time, but of choice. Around them, the city carried on, oblivious. But for Lyra and Lucien, the world had shifted. They weren't safe, they weren't promised forever, but they were together, and that was enough. As dawn crept over the skyline, they drove away, leaving behind the ruins of Lucien's empire and the ghosts of their past. For the first time, Lyra didn't feel like she was drowning. She felt like she was breathing fire. Her heart had raced the night she first saw him, the stranger whose world was nothing like hers. That night, she thought the surprise was simply a wrong number, a twist of fate that delivered danger to her doorstep. But in the end, there were two surprises. The first, that she could love a man who lived in the shadows, a man she should have feared. The second, that he would choose her over the very empire that defined him. It began with a message sent by mistake. Just a handful of words, meant for someone else. Ordinary. Forgettable. But sometimes the smallest accidents are the sparks that set fire to destiny. For Lyra and Lucien, one night changed everything. One night turned fear into passion, strangers into lovers, and choices into sacrifices that would echo for the rest of their lives. Love, after all, is rarely safe. But perhaps it was never meant to be. And as their story fades into memory, it leaves us with a question. Would you have risked it all? Would you have chosen him or walked away? Let me know what you would have done in the comments. Because in the end, stories like this remind us of something simple, yet powerful, that love is never without cost, but sometimes, the cost is worth paying. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next one. We have more romance, more heartbreak, and more unforgettable twists waiting for you. This was One Night, Two Surprises, a story of love, danger, and fate, a reminder that even in the most unlikely places, love can still find a way.